Today, we're going to dig into a really interesting, kind of radical idea that might just flip how you think about love and family. It's this concept that you can actually love better by, believe it or not, doing less.
It all started with this one sentence, way back in 1952. A British pediatrician, Donald Winnicott, said it to this totally exhausted mother who was feeling awful for not having the perfect snack for her toddler. And just those two words, good enough, they ended up sparking a quiet revolution.
But, fast forward 70 years, and it feels like we've completely forgotten that simple, powerful advice. And it's created this massive contradiction right at the heart of modern family life.
So here's the paradox we're all living in. On one hand, we have more information about parenting than ever before, right? I mean, it's endless. Studies, apps, social media, all of it right at our fingertips. But on the other hand, all this information seems to be making us more stressed than any generation of parents before us.
And when I say more stressed, I mean a lot more. Get this, studies that measure cortisol, that's our main stress hormone, found that the levels in today's parents are actually higher than in air traffic controllers during a snowstorm. Just let that sink in for a second. That's a staggering comparison.
And this pressure to be perfect, it has a real measurable cost. A recent Stanford study found that on the days mothers reported trying to do it all, the homemade organic lunches, the perfect educational activities, the whole shebang, their cortisol levels spiked by a whopping 40%.
But here's the part that's absolutely crucial. That stress, it doesn't just stay with the parent. The very same study found that as a parent's cortisol shot up, their kid's cortisol did the exact same thing. It mirrored the rise. Stress is literally contagious inside a family.
So if trying to be perfect is stressing us out and our kids, what's the alternative? Well, let's circle back to that idea from 1952.
This is the core concept, the good enough parent. And look, this isn't about being lazy or mediocre. Not at all. It's about providing a reliable, loving foundation and really understanding that perfection isn't the goal. In fact, and this is key, small imperfections or failures can actually be good for a child's development.
And this wasn't just some abstract theory he cooked up. It was grounded in some pretty intense real-world observation. Winnicott developed this whole idea after working with children who were evacuated during the war. He saw that the kids who really thrived weren't the ones in the fanciest homes. They were with ordinary people who were simply there for them, who were just present and reliable.
Okay, so let's jump forward to today, because modern science is actually proving Winnicott was totally onto something, and the results are pretty surprising.
Remember that Stanford study we talked about? Well, here's the twist. The kids of the so-called good enough parents, the ones who sometimes serve chicken nuggets for dinner and let the laundry pile up, they weren't just okay. They were absolutely thriving. They actually scored higher on emotional regulation, they showed more resilience, and they felt more securely attached to their parents.
And this really gets to the heart of the matter, this idea of performance versus presence. So much of our stress today comes from feeling like we have to perform parenthood. It's fueled by what neuroscientists call social comparison theory, every time we scroll through those perfectly curated social media feeds. But what the research keeps showing us over and over is that the one thing that truly matters is presence. That's the essential ingredient for connection.
All right, the science is clear. It all makes sense. But this brings us to the big question, right? How in the world do we actually do this? How do we put it into practice?
Okay, let's get practical. Let's break it down.
So, here's a really practical 5-step recipe for what the source material calls strategic subtraction. I love that phrase. First, name your absolute non-negotiables, things like safety and love. Then, maybe try creating a not-to-do list, things you are consciously letting go of. Next, audit your guilt. Where is it coming from? Redefine what success looks like for your family. And finally, learn to let the small stuff go strategically.
And this idea of redefining success is so huge. Maybe a successful day isn't one where the house is spotless and you cooked a 3-course meal. Maybe, just maybe, it's a day where you shared a real, genuine laugh with your kids. And that's not settling for the bare minimum. That's actually the whole point.
And when we actually manage to shift our focus this way, something pretty incredible starts to happen. We end up giving our kids, and honestly ourselves, a really profound gift.
Take the story of Sarah, a designer from Seattle. She decided to run a little 1-month experiment where she lowered the bar to the absolute basics. If the kids are alive, fed, and hugged, the day is a win. The results were immediate. Her stress levels dropped by 1/3, and her older kids' nightly meltdowns,
They just stopped. But the real payoff, the thing that really hit home, was something her son said to her.
Mommy, you're fun again. Not perfect, not organized, fun. I mean, that one little sentence just says everything about what our kids actually want and need from us, doesn't it?
And that right there, that's the core takeaway. Love isn't about putting on a show for the world, or even for our kids. It's about just being there, being present, and connected.
Because when we let go of that impossible standard of perfection, we actually teach our children some of the most important lessons they'll ever learn. They learn that love isn't something you have to earn. They learn that making a mistake isn't a catastrophe. And they get a front row seat to what real resilience, boundaries, and grace actually look like.
And this is the final, powerful idea to really sit with. Being a good enough parent isn't a compromise. It isn't about settling. By letting go of the stress of perfection, you create so much more space for the joy and connection that really matter. You don't just love well, you actually love better.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What if the real secret to a happier, more connected family isn't about piling more onto our plates, but about strategically and intentionally taking things away? What if loving better really does mean doing less?